Alongside the reveal of 10th edition at Adepticon, we got our first glimpse as well at the new and improved unit datasheets. In particular, they showed off the one for the Termagant, showing off the new condensed movement, toughness, save, wound, leadership and OC stats, and then also showing that the weapons are now moving to their own category on the datasheet, which will presumably help GW to balance things out by allowing different weapons to have different profiles depending on who's wielding them. And today we got a bit more info on these new stats and also our first look at the stat line of the mighty Primaris Intercessor, and as you can see it is largely the same. They are still movement 6, toughness 4, have a 3-up save and 2 wounds. The big new changes are a leadership value of 6, which seems like a nerf, I know, but it is actually a bit deceptive because leadership now is a role that you have to get above, rather than like in previous editions going back to 7th where you had to roll under your leadership, you now have to roll above it. So with a 6, this means that on 2d6 you will need to roll above that to pass, and that means that in general they are about still as likely to pass a leadership test as they have been in previous editions of 40k. The big change to this is that leadership doesn't now remove models like it's done in 8th and 9th where things just ran away if you failed your battle shock. Instead, it interacts as a way to impede a unit's ability to do things, so they are less likely to be able to score objectives well, they are less likely to be able to fall back from a combat, they are less likely to be able to use and benefit from stratagems. So in essence, it seems that as you lose your morale on the battlefield, you are less likely to listen to the orders of your commanding officers or be able to perform as effectively as you normally would. You are not as efficient at, keeping those vital objectives safe from the opponent. You're not as efficient as, hearing that command come through so you can take advantage of that stratagem that is trying to be, used on that unit. I think it's a really cool way of doing leadership that, in my opinion anyway, makes a lot more sense than just having random extra models running away, which I always thought was a bit weird. It makes sense in games like AOS, I think, but in 40k it kind of didn't make that much sense to me, apart from maybe in armies like Orcs. But this is a really fun way to make it so that instead of just losing models, your squad is still there, but it's just becoming less battle effective, and you can't do all the cool things that you would have been able to do before because they are just not as sort of coherent, and they're just ducking their heads trying to get some cover instead of doing that cool stratagem. So it's a really fun, interesting, nice way of doing leadership that, as I said, makes a lot of sense. So for me, this is a really big win on making leadership feel more impactful and important on the game. The other new stat on the datasheet, OC, stands for Objective Control, and this is essentially how well a unit holds an objective. So with an OC of 2, a squad of 10 Marines, assuming I'm reading the article correctly, you count up basically the OC of the squad that's holding the objective, and that is what their sort of value is for whether they control it or not. So with an OC of 2, a squad of 10 Marines will count essentially as 20 OC for holding a particular objective, meaning that things like small 5-man squads of Terminators won't be able to outmuscle them for it, but perhaps a 20-strong unit of Orc Boys, for example, will be able to outdo them and will be able to steal that objective from under the Marines' noses. It's once again a good way of simplifying the game, but still keeping the essence of the old rules that we are used to now, things like objective secured and the rules which have been sort of coming in more and more in 8th and 9th edition, where a unit counted as 5 models for controlling an objective, and in particular we see that on things like the Imperial Knights and on the Custodes, where that was a really good way to allow them to play the objective game a bit more competitively. That does seem to be a thing that they've just put blanket out to all units now, and some are going to be better at holding objectives than others. You won't be able to just put a small 5-man squad of objective secured Terminators on an objective and steal it from absolutely anything, because if there is a unit with a better OC than them on it, then they will control it instead. So I think it's a really interesting, simple way to help players work out who is controlling an objective in 10th edition to make your games just run more smoothly and flow a bit better. Finally, they also show off a bit more on the weapons front and how that is going to work. Ballistic skill and weapon skill have both now moved away from the main stat line and into the weapon profile itself. So as you can see, a bolt pistol is 1 attack, hitting on 3s, still with strength 4 and no AP. The close combat weapon they show off is 3 attacks, so probably shock assault is gone. I'm just going to say right off the bat, probably shock assault is gone. But hitting on 3s and still strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. They did say they are trying to rein in a lot of the AP in the game. So whilst these are 2 very basic weapons, you would expect them to be AP 0. I think a lot of the stuff that we know that is AP 2, AP 3 may well drop down as well. But what's really interesting about this is that it means they can add a huge amount of granularity, not only within an army, but also for weapons that sort of appear across several armies in the game. So for a guard unit, the bolt pistol may well be 1 attack, but instead at ballistic skill 4+ instead of 3+. Or, a close combat weapon for another faction, maybe 2 attacks base rather than 3, and maybe hit on 2s or hit on 5s or whatever it may be. It allows them to add a huge amount more complexity into the weapon profiles, whilst also at the same time making it a lot simpler for players to understand what they're looking at and what war gear can do for their units. They can very easily balance units in particular that have a lot of choice in them now. So things like power swords, power axes, chain fists, thunderhammers, which all, before you could take on things like, terminators and that sort of stuff, and they'd have to balance the unit profile and the weapon skill and the ballistic skill on the profile with how they interacted with the weapons they can take. They can now just do it all in the weapon stat line itself. So, a power sword may be hitting on 3s with 2 attacks. A thunderhammer will presumably hit on 4s base, so they won't have to worry about adding a -1 to hit addendum in the weapon. It will just naturally hit on 4s. Maybe things like thunderhammers or power fists in Astra Militarum armies will have that base 4 to hit, but also maybe instead of being strength 8, they might be strength 6 to show that it's a weaker thing wielding them. They won't have to put in the strength ×2 on a power fist, because it will just vary depending on what unit profile that weapon appears on, if that makes sense. So again, I think it's a really elegant way to simplify the game down so that you're not scrolling through hundreds of pages in a codex. It's all just there, nice and easy to see. You don't need to work out, is it strength ×2 and then +1 for getting +1 strength on the charge? You don't have to do all the mental arithmetic anymore. It is just there in front of you, and you can just, use that weapon as it is, as it appears in that weapon profile. So it's a really nice way to quicken up the game and simplify it, but still allowing for the complexity and the sort of the changes between the units that a lot of people want, in terms of having different weapons for different units and having the customization on their units as well. I think although we haven't seen everything yet, there is still a lot to show off. These changes that we've seen so far really do seem to be some good ones. I think they are massive quality of life improvements pretty much across the board, and I think it will make it a lot easier for players to get in, know what they're sort of playing with, know what it can do, know what they need to roll, and just get games started and done a lot more quickly and efficiently than they have ever been before, without taking away the fun of sort of simple math hammer that a lot of people still like to do in their head as they're working out, the best weapon to take or what they can expect to do to an enemy unit when they charge into it. So I think just in terms of timekeeping alone, this is a really good change. And as I said, I think it will get rid of a lot of the endless page swapping that has become a bit of a thing recently throughout 8th and 9th edition. So from that perspective alone, I think these stat lines are a huge step in the right direction. And if the rest of 10th edition follows this sort of idea of simplifying things but still keeping that complexity, it will be a really good addition for established players as well as new people trying to get into the hobby for the first time. So there we go, just a very quick look at the updated unit stat lines and also weapon profiles, but I would love to know what you think. Do you like these changes? Do you like the move of the weapons to their own little slot in the datasheet? Do you like the new objective control mechanic? Do you like the way leadership seems to be done now? Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'd also like to know what you think we will see in terms of changes to some of the other weapons in the game, things like thunderhammers and power fists and las cannons. What sort of stat line do you think they will end up having? Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.